where there was no camp, just gas and burning the people, which is...
Yes. Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, they're ready to go.
Okay.
You ready?
Uh-huh.
Okay. Would you please tell me your full name?
I'm Cela Miller.
And tell me when and where you were born.
I was born 1921. I'm sorry. How did I get to that? My husband was born in 21. I was born in 1923 in Pinchów, Poland.
Okay. Now what I'd like you to do is just go back and think about your childhood and your early life in Poland and tell me about your family, your siblings, your extended family. Just tell me about your early family life in Poland.
My father and mother were 40 years old when the war broke out. And we were 6 children. And I had 1 brother and 4 more sisters. And we had a small business, like on Main Street, and we lived behind the store. And we were kind of happy. We were not rich, but we got along, and we were, like everybody else, was about in the same position. And we were happy. We had, my parents also had big families, so we had, you know, uncles and aunts and cousins, lots of cousins. And we went to school, and we were happy, except we were, the last year before the war, we heard in school, sometimes the teacher would say something that the Germans might start a war, and of course they want to take over Poland. And that already, you know, was on back of my mind. But we were hoping for the best, of course. And that's about it.
Okay, I want to just go back a little bit and ask you a few things, or continue a little bit more with your childhood as far as growing up Jewish in Poland. Did you experience any anti-Semitism as a child? What kind of community did you live in? Were the people mostly Jewish? Was it mixed?
It wasn't a too big town, but it was close to Krakow, which is the 2nd largest city in Poland. And I did not experience especially anti-Semitism, maybe a little bit, but not bad. I heard on the streets, you know, some things, but in school I didn't have a problem. And my father maybe, you know, on the street wearing a Jewish hat, somebody would say, "Hey, Jew," something like that. But otherwise, it wasn't too bad. I felt that I'm not, you know, in my own country, and I knew that it was anti-Semitism. But, you know, we got used to it, and that was it.
Now, what I'd like for you to do is tell me how things started to change with the war, when the war started.
Okay. I guess you know that the Germans came in to Poland September 1st. And there was some resistance from the Polish soldiers or whatever. I happened to see through the window Polish soldiers shooting at the Germans and vice versa. Of course, they killed them. And after a little while, they started from one side of town, and the other side of town started burning the town because of the resistance. Then they went around to houses, especially probably in the main streets, and they hollered raus, which means out, and they showed us the way to go to the church, to go to the church, because it was already, we felt the smoke already, and they were burning the town. Everybody went to the church, except lots of people before. I mean, you could tell that that the war is coming, and because we heard that they in the neighboring town, the Germans, lots of people went under, and they went into cellars under the big buildings and so far. And the ones that did that never survived because they burned all the houses, and the people never did come out.
When you went into the church, let me ask you, I mean, when they were rounding everyone up, were they rounding everyone up, or were they just rounding up Jewish people?
No, everybody.
The whole town.
Who lived around in my section, as I know.
Okay.
You know, and of course there were a lot more. It was a big church, and everybody was rounded up to get there. It wasn't too far. It was like on the same block. And of course we went out with whatever we had on ourselves. You know, just the clothes that we had on. And we stayed there, I think, just hours, or maybe till the next morning. I cannot remember that. And the next morning, they let us out to find our way, wherever. Of course, we went to see our place, and it was just nothing, you know, just nothing was left from the house, or nothing was left from the belongings. Anyway, and that was the situation with most people from that church. And so we had a distant uncle living kind of on a side street, not, I don't know how far, maybe a mile from us, or not quite that far. And we went to see if his house, as a matter of fact, he had his own house, if his house is still there and if they're there. And he was lucky, they survived. They didn't burn the side small streets. And they had about 3 rooms altogether. So they took us in and into one large room, very large room. The whole family was still fine, you know. Lots of people right away lost some of the families. And that's how we lived from 39 till 42. And of course it wasn't easy, but the main thing was that we all still together, and the Germans did not make a ghetto in that town because they didn't have, because there wasn't room for a ghetto. There wasn't enough, like I said, most of the town was burned, so they didn't make a ghetto. So we were kind of free, except we could not go out of town.
Now, let me just ask you this. Once you went to your uncle's and you're living there from 39 to 42, were the Jews treated differently? Did you start to experience anti-Semitism at this point, or?
Well, I saw very often some Jewish people were killed. We also heard about the Gentiles too, not just Jews. Like they round up the intelligence of the town, the priests and some from the university professors, and we don't know what happened to them. They rounded them up and took him someplace. I can guess that they killed him. I don't know why they didn't want the intelligence of the town. And some mornings you get up and you see on the wall blood all over, spread, and you knew who got killed, you know, who they killed. And then the Germans, they ran out some Jewish, from big stores, they ran out the Jews and put in Germans, sometimes a Polak, and took over the stores. And they just ran you out, and they didn't care what you do.
How are you and your family living and eating, and how are you getting by with?
My father had a leather shop, and also we were making like in Poland. At that time, you did not buy shoes. You sold the leather goods, and you made the top of the shoe. You know, on machine, we had 2 or 3 machines where they would make most of it, and the rest was made by hand. You understand?
Mm-hmm.
So slowly, my father got his clientele, like shoemakers would buy from him and order that, or even from the country people would come in and, you know, request for themselves, or, you know, and they maybe would make him by themselves. And we kind of, it wasn't bad. He kind of made a living out of that. And like I say, we survived on that. It wasn't, you know, it wasn't really great, but we knew it was a war, and some people had it worse.
Right.
And that's
so you were still free to come and go within the city, and
right. Yes, that was a big help, because the people could come in and deal with my father.
So at this time, did you ever have any designation as Jews? Were they ordering you to wear stars or armbands?
Oh, yes, they right away put on.
At 39, as soon as you went to your uncle's.
Right away you wore on your sleeve a Star of David, a white thing, and the Star of David was on it, and that represented that you're Jewish, and you could not go out without it, in case they stop you and ask you if you're Jewish. And if you are, they would shoot you. They would take you kind of to a place, and you never came back.
What about in this interim schooling? Did the children get to continue?
No,
with
not the Jewish people.
So no more school after 39?
No. I had a sister who was going to start the first year. She was looking forward to it so much, but there was no school, nothing. And everything stopped, education stopped. And
so in 1942, things changed again dramatically.
We heard, of course, what's going on in Warsaw, that they have this, you know, ghetto, that people were dying in the ghettos. As a matter of fact, my husband is from Warsaw. But of course, then I didn't even know him. I'm just saying that. But it was on a holiday, Rosh Hashanah, and we saw on trucks from the neighborhood, from the next town, small town, which is about 20 miles from us. The name of it was Busko. They were coming in and straight to the train station, and they were taking him to this train station and loaded on trains. I didn't see that, but we knew that that's what's happening. They were passing by us, and we knew what's going to happen. But there was no place to go.
Where did you think these people were going? Did you know where they were going?
Yes, we knew. We didn't know for sure. You know, we never thought that it would be that bad. But we knew that they're gathering the Jewish people and taking them away someplace. The same day, I believe, my father had walked out for a minute, and my mother and my older sister, she said that Bluma and I, have to go into the woods, which was not too far from where we lived. Of course, we all start crying, and we weren't going. We said we all go, or nobody's going. Anyway, she put some money in both of our pockets, and she just pushed us out of the house, and she says, go in the woods. To make this story short, we said, where are you going? They said they would go to someplace, maybe in the woods, maybe somewhere else, but they will try to save themselves too. Finally, we didn't have any choice. She closed the door, she locked the door, so we went. We went with a street smaller even than where we lived, so we wouldn't be noticed. And on the way there, quite a few Jewish people were walking the same way to the woods. So we kind of got close to them to go together. But when we went to the woods, one of them, a man that was known very well, he was, I guess, maybe the most successful in town. He stopped and he said, dear children, we cannot continue to go together. We don't know our future. We don't know, maybe a small percentage of us would survive, but we cannot go together because we would not have a chance. And of course that was bad news. But I looked around in the woods. That was in the woods already. I looked around and I could see from the far an uncle and a cousin. They were waiting maybe for their family, for their immediate family to come and try to survive. So of course they walked over to us, and we were walking towards them. And they asked, one had a wife, and the other one was a few years older than Bluma and I was. Of course, they lived in the same house, but we didn't see him at that time, and we didn't know if they tried to survive or not. And so we went together, and we stayed in the woods until the snow came down. It was, in Europe, the winter is much earlier than here, and it's very, very cold, and we just had what we had on ourselves. So we brought one of the, as a matter of fact, the cousin went into the fields and brought in in Poland they made out of straw something like the only way I can describe it is much larger than a doghouse, except made out of straw. Okay, you can. That's about it. And we stayed there, and at night time, my cousin and I would go down into it's not a town, but the people who work in the fields or own fields lived. What do you call them?
Was it a village?
A village, right. And some of the people he knew and my father also had business with them too. So we would go to them, and he knew where they lived more than I did. And we would buy from them bread, and mostly that's about all I think we got is a very large bread or two. And we paid them, of course, good. And because they weren't supposed to do that either. He could have gotten into trouble. As a matter of fact, for 1 kilogram of sugar, if you turn in a Jew, you could get 1 kilogram of sugar for them. You understand?
Yes.
Okay. I guess sugar was a very shortage of sugar. Anyway, he was nice enough to sell to us the bread, and I think every second night we would go down and get that large bread, and as soon as we came, we would divide it into 4 pieces, and everybody got a quarter of the loaf of bread. And of course, it wasn't easy to live on that, but we still had, we were still kind of strong and everything. And it wasn't bad. We just didn't know what's the future, what else we can do. Anyway, at one time, the snow already started falling. And I went at nighttime. I don't know if I was not smart enough or something. But I went to the same town where I was from, and I knew that my parents left their covers, down covers for the winter, and maybe some other stuff. I didn't know exactly what, but I knew that we need that. And they were really nice, the Polish people. They gave me that. And I went back with it, and that, helped through the night not to freeze.
When you went back into the town, did you hear any news of your family? Did you learn anything about them?
I went to the house, and they lived right behind our house. There was nothing there. As a matter of fact, I went with my cousin, and he thought that his father buried some money. He showed me where it was going already. They went through everything. I don't know who, the Germans or the Polish people.
But your parents and your
brothers
and sisters
were no
gone.
Jewish people.
They were gone.
There were no Jewish
and
people.
So you didn't.
No.
You had no idea where their whereabouts.
I also went to one person that was also a Gentile who worked for my father at least 15, 20 years. And I know that he let him have leather because he knew that he cannot drag leather with him. So he left it there just in case one of us will survive or whatever. He left it to him. And when we got there, we saw another Jewish person arguing with him. I don't have it, something like that. And we came in and I said, "Hi, how are you? Have you seen any of my parents lately?" He said, "No." I said, "We in need of money. Can you please pay us something for the leather or give us the leather?" He said he doesn't have it. He doesn't have it, he said. He doesn't know what happened to it. I couldn't argue even with him. I just left. We just left and went back into the woods. And one time the man who's in charge of the woods, like here, somebody who's in charge of the whole forest, he saw us.
Like a ranger?
No, he worked. He got a pension for taking care of the forest. Maybe it is a ranger.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, he saw us. He talked to us very little, and he left. And we got scared. We got scared that he might give us out. So we picked up, and we went that evening when it started getting darker. We went to a neighborhood town, to the next town rather. It was, I don't know how far, but we walked all night and got there before it started to get daylight. Of course, it was in winter time, so we had all night. We were hoping that the uncle of ours is living there still, because we knew he had he was not just a cabinet maker, but he made from wood. He was selling like 2x4s, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I don't
lumber.
know.
He was a lumber dealer.
He was right. He had a big place. He had it in the cellar, and he had it in the upstairs, whatever. And we came in, and they were still living there. We knocked on the door, and the uncle said, let us in. And of course, most of the family was gone. They left him and his son, because the reason they left him is they were helping. They were helping the Germans if they need lumber to build some things. They were doing that for them, for the Germans. And they knew that they would not stay there forever, that after a few months they would also get rid of them, because it was a date when they're supposed to be Judenrein, which means clear of Jews, no more Jews. And they also had a daughter but she was hiding. You know, the Germans were not supposed to know that she was there. They took us downstairs where they moved 2x4 or whatever. I really know very little about lumber. And there was a large kind of closet, and they led us into that closet. And they said they would help us with food. And you know, we welcome to stay as long as we can. So that was good for, you know, that was good. You know, that was a big help. We stayed there, I don't know exactly how long, maybe 2 weeks. And there was an announcement on the street, a loudspeaker, that if any Jewish people are left hidden, they can come out and come in this place and go to a camp, to a working camp on this truck. And we were sitting, all 4 of us, thinking what to do. And each one of us looked at the others. And first I came out. I got up and I said, Bluma, you're going with me. I haven't heard of the war ending, and I don't know how long. I know that our uncle Kenneth will not stay here forever, and this sounds good. If it's a working camp, maybe they let us work, and maybe by any chance we'll survive. I know that we couldn't go in the country, you know, to live, to stay with anybody, with any Polish people. We didn't have that much money to offer them, you know, to help us survive. And Bluma said, okay. They said they weren't going because the men usually were more afraid because of beatings that they got, or you know, or heard or saw the beatings that the Jewish people got from the Germans. So anyway, we said goodbye and we left.
So this was your uncle and cousin who stayed behind. They stayed in hiding.
Right. We left and went on the truck. And there were, of course, the truck was kind of almost full. But after a while, and maybe 3-5 minutes before we were leaving, they both came up. They changed their mind. Maybe they talked it over with the uncle and his children, and they decided to come too. As a matter of fact, he told them that after the Judenrein, after they would get rid of all the Jewish people, that is where they would go. Even this was just one time that you could go, one day, but they would be able to go later to that camp. That supposedly it wasn't too bad. So I was, of course, happy that they also came, because, you know, I guess the more that I knew anybody, especially the family. Okay, we got there, and the Germans, we had to stand on. They counted us, and kind of not a very welcome voice, hollered, you know, this and that. Don't remember exactly what. And then we were showing. There was a Jewish police also was there, and we were shown where to go. There were barracks. On one side were men or boys, you could say, because it was only young people, like from what I could tell, not old and no children, of course, no children at all. And they would show us to our barracks, and it was two floors, or two whatever you call it, just some straw and a board between, and for every person. And I'm not sure if we had blankets. I'm not sure. Maybe we had blankets. And we had 2 shifts and going to work in a ammunition camp. We worked with ammunition. Of course, they didn't call it ammunition. They call it pieces. We were making like bullets. Mm-hmm. And there were machines with oil, working on oil. Very few were electric. Most of them you work on machines, little machines, with the hands. It wasn't easy, and but it was 12-hour shift, day shift and night shift, and you would change from day, 1 week night, one day day shifts. But whatever we had organized since we left the house, maybe very little. Maybe we had an extra dress or an extra, I know, 1 pair of shoes we just had that you could keep still. Some people had more because maybe they came straight from home. I don't know exactly. But we would get for breakfast a piece of bread and coffee, and for lunch we would go in the kitchen, get some soup, and maybe another piece of bread, which wasn't too bad. That was already good. And we would work in that factory, but very often, not very often, but in the mornings, every morning, very early, you come out for counting, and of course it would be very cold, freezing weather, and it took time. They took time with it, and many times they would either call you by name or look at you, and they would call you, and you never saw these people again. They somehow needed so many people, and they needed less and less, and we never saw him from that day on after the war, or right then and there. And I think they picked mostly older people, and sometimes young too, like strong big men. They would pick them too, and you know, and get rid of them. So you always were afraid if it's your time or not. And we worked in the factory, like I said, and the SS would walk with us. It was a little distance from the barracks, and they would walk with us back too, and they would holler in German, you know, walk this way, walk that way. And then they also would come in at any time and into the barracks to look you over, I don't know. And you would have to make a speech. One of us would have to make a speech. They would tell you, they told you before what kind of speech. In German, you said it, or in Jewish, because Jewish and German is it's kind of close. So you did the best you can, and then they would leave. You know, of course, they would carry some, I don't know what do you call it, a big weapon.
Machine gun, kind of.
Yeah, something like that. And they would leave, so you breathe again. Okay.
Before you go on, I want to ask, do you remember the name of this camp?
Yes, it was Kelce Hassak. The name of it was in Kelce, and the name of the camp was Hassak, Hassag. And Then one day they told everybody to come out from the barracks. There was no work, nobody went to work, but everybody should come out from the barracks to that usual place where they count you and everything. By that time, my uncle from Kielce, from that smaller town, had already arrived, maybe a couple months or more before, with his daughter and the son to that camp. And they were one of us, you know. They also worked in the factory. And sometimes they let them stay around the barracks because they would work for the Germans, build something or help, you know, repair something. And on that same day, when they heard that everybody's going out, they presumed that we're going to be deported, that they were taking us out, because we knew that the Russians are getting closer, and they would transport us out. So they hid themselves. They hid themselves in over the barracks in a what do you call it?
Attic. Was it
in
like
an attic? They, except for their son. Their son was went to the factory like us, so he was among us. But the daughter and the uncle hid themselves in the attic, and they were missing, you know. And I guess they knew exactly who it was, because we missed them. We were just 500 people there, and they went in front of the attic up, and I don't know how many times they shot in, and they killed them. They killed the uncle and his daughter, because later we saw their son, and he told us what happened. Anyway, they took us out from there, and they sent us to Częstochowa. That was much closer to Germany, and it was still the same factory, ammunition factory. And it was a little worse, but it didn't take long, and they took us to Germany. They took us to Bergen-Belsen, and that was, they didn't burn people, but it was a death camp. They had, I don't know how many thousands of Jewish people. They didn't have any barracks. They emptied some kind of buildings. I don't know what they were, warehouses or something. And all they would give you is a piece of bread, and in the evening they called it a soup, and it was just water, and maybe a couple pieces of cabbage would swim around, and people were dying like flies. Also, it was a terrible sickness, a terrible typhus, and people were going crazy. They were walking and talking to themselves, or they would just lay on the floor. And of course, Bluma had it first. She had very high fever. Let me just tell you that how life first was in that barrack. I don't know how many hundreds of people was, not in a barrack, but some kind of a warehouse. There was no straw, no nothing, no blankets. You had to lay down on the side to fit at night time, to what you call it, to have room enough to sleep. And of course, Bluma was always with me, and when you every morning, of course, was counting, and the eyes was under us, and we would still stay on this. They called it appeal. I don't know why, in German. And then in the daytime, sometimes they would let you work, and the work was, if there was on the side someplace debris or some bricks, you would take him from one place and put him in another side. I guess, and the next day you take those from the other side and take him someplace else on the same place, just to be doing something. And of course, you were terribly cold, because, like I said, it was icy. And you had, by then, yeah, when you came in, you took a shower. We didn't know if we come out from the shower, but you went in with one door, and you came out with the other door, and they would give you a dress, which you probably saw on TV, with the stripes. I don't remember if anything else, if you had any underwear or not. But they gave you that type of dress. It didn't matter what size, just the dress. And that's all you had. And like I said, on the cold weather, standing on the appeal, lots of people didn't survive already. And we were there maybe a month, and they start sending us out. At first, we were told that they sending us to work in a camp where you would be working on airplanes. So we got there, and you go up on the plane. They give you a brush, and you paint here a little bit and there a little bit. It was no work, actually. We didn't know what we were doing. And you had the same treatment as in Bergen-Belsen. The same soup at nighttime and one piece of bread. And in Bergen-Belsen, I'm going back and forth. In Bergen-Belsen, if not from our group, but from the groups before, they would come up to you and they say, I'll give you a sweater, or I'll give you a coat. They probably had that from the people who died. And if you give me your piece of bread, you know. And that was right after you came in, so you don't know what's going on. You wouldn't know how bad it is. And some people, you know, they didn't know that it was so bad. They would give away the first piece of bread. And it was terrible, because all day you didn't have anything else until the next morning, that piece of bread. And it wasn't much. It was just a piece of bread, black bread. And of course, we kept losing weight already, and Bluma got sick. And when we went to the next town in Burgau, where we worked on the airplanes, she already could not walk. So she lay down, and right away we were told she has to go to the hospital. They called it hospital, but it was the same thing. It was under the ground, a place, just dirt, and you also one next to each other. Of course, it was just women. The men went, we don't know where even. We never saw him again. And she went there, and I was very scared what they could do with her in a hospital, you know. So I looked in every time I had a chance, and I called her if she could come and she was very, very weak. And I told her that I'll see what I can do for her the next day. And I went to a capo. A capo was somebody Jewish also, but they would get double the amount of food as a regular person would get. And I would see what I could do for her. Anyway, I went to the capo of a girl that I knew. I heard that she has an apple, and I asked her if she could possibly switch my piece of bread for the apple. And she did it. And I gave Bluma the apple. Then I told her to try to get stronger, because I'm going to take her out from here, because I don't know if you have a chance to survive here. She says, okay, when you come tomorrow, maybe somehow I can get out of here. So the next day, I came for her early because I heard that we were going someplace. We're going to walk to another camp. So I was kind of holding her, and then we start marching, you know, I don't know, 8 or 10 lengthwise, I don't know, 4, I believe. And we were walking to the next camp. How she survived, I'll never know. I was pushing her, and somebody else maybe was helping me. And if somebody would have seen it, like the Germans, we would have been both in trouble. But we came to the next camp, and it was the same old thing. And next morning we were walking again, marching, they called it. And by then, it was in one of those underground camps, they call it. And we were laying again, one next to each other. I already had a 2, I had high fever, and she got a little bit better, which was great. And we were like that a few days, maybe, I don't know how long, I cannot tell you. By then, I didn't see her. I didn't see her, and I don't know where she went. And we heard bombs already falling. You know what I'm talking about? Mm-hmm. They were bombarded. Right. It was the United States, and we were really, really happy about that. We didn't care if we survive or not. We just wanted the war to end. And
but at this point, you and Bloom are separated?
No, we were together, except she left the barrack.
Oh, okay.
For a few minutes. It seemed like for a long, long time. She finally came in, and she had a piece of bread. That was maybe silly of her, but she said she finally got into the kitchen, working in the kitchen. The biggest thing would be if you got a job in the kitchen. That was like being in heaven, maybe. Because somehow you could get sorry.
It's okay. Do you want some water?
She said she got a piece of bread for me. But that was, you know why? Because most people left the kitchen because they saw what was going on. Probably the Germans already start leaving to hide themselves. And and after a while, I told her she shouldn't have done it because she was, in danger. You hear the bombs falling and all that. Anyway, I'm making it really short. Anyway, I saw a soldier in the door, and it was an American soldier. They say it's an American soldier. This was my biggest dream, of course. When the bombs were falling, I thought to myself, if I live to see a soldier, I'll kiss his feet. But I couldn't get up. I had very high fever. And I think Bluma walked over. I'm sorry to make you cry. It's okay. Anyway, they took us to a hospital where they gave us a bath and a clean bed. And it was Holzhausen. The name of the hospital was Holzhausen, and it was close to Landsberg am Lech, Germany. And there were sisters, and they are nuns. They were nuns. They were very nice to us, and doctors, German doctors, and of course it was organized by the United States. Everything, probably Red Cross, which I'm pretty sure. And they gave us the first food. I remember it was, I think, rice and milk. And I couldn't believe to see that. So they gave me some, and I started eating, and my stomach wouldn't take it. I couldn't eat it. Anyway, I was there a long time. I was a lot longer sick than Bluma was. I don't know why. I want to mention one thing that I forgot to talk about. Maybe I get away from this for a little while, okay?
Yes, go back.
When they send us out from Bergen-Belsen to go to work on airplanes, before they send us out, they had a whole commission. I don't know, assessment, of course. And you had to take off your clothes and pass by them, kind of, not really close, but pass by them. They would look you over if you still were able to work. You understand?
Yes.
And if you were like 35, 40 years, you were no good. And so, of course, they choose probably half of them, and the rest, we know what happened to them. And, okay, to make it short, Bluma cried. She just thought that for sure that she will not be accepted because she was always very slim. She still is slim. She was just, you know, bones. But I guess she had a round face and, of course, very, very young. So she survived. They let her through. Anyway, the whole time, it was, you know, it wasn't easy. We knew where our parents more or less are, that they did not survive because it lasted still so long. That was in 42, and this was 45. And anyway, some of the people that came in to those same camps told us that they were on the same trains with them. And they saw them, but these were like boys, 18, 17 years old. And some of them jumped the train and survived. So I knew where they went, and they didn't have a chance, because over there it was just a camp where it wasn't a camp. It was just crematoriums, and the only people work was with the Jewish people, you know, like put them through that, or dig big ditches or whatever,